Hello there friends, welcome back to another episode of Generation Tech. My name is Alan. If anyone is going to take a ragtag army of dark magic infused blinged out red ribbon wrapped stormtroopers and Night Sister zombies on an epic intergalactic crusade to retake the known galaxy, it's definitely going to be Thrawn. Like a blue Elon Musk, Thrawn has some character flaws and odd personality quirks, but is undoubtedly a deadly competent individual, especially when he's focused on a clear target. And right now, those dangerous looking red eyes of his are focused on getting off of this wasteland of a planet, which happens to be surrounded by a whale graveyard. I imagine the entire atmosphere smells like a fish market, which is probably why these great mothers have lost all color in their complexion.
It reeks.
But what exactly is the state of Thrawn's navy here? How many ships does he have at his disposal? How many troops are inside of those ships? And how operational is the Chimaera? I mean, as powerful as Night Sister magic is, can it stop a turbo laser? Can they summon an Imperial-class Star Destroyer with magical ichor?
Surprise, motherfucker!
No, they can't. That's why they're stuck. And so let's try to figure out just how operational Thrawn's navy is here. So let's take a look back. Remember in the last moments of the liberation of Lothal, a pack of Purgles just started throwing themselves at the Imperial fleet. This was really devastating for me to watch. I know the Imperials are the bad guys here, especially considering the fact that they bombarded the capital city of Lothal with turbo lasers, but these individuals are still human beings. They have families, they have children, friends, entire lives that they could have continued living. You know, the average Imperial sailor and trooper are just a small cog in the cruel and relentless machine that serves not only to oppress the citizens of the galaxy, but also the very soldiers that serve it. Death is ultimate. No matter how good or bad you were in your last moments, you'll never get another chance to return and fix your mistakes. Unless you're like a named character with a very close connection to the Force. And seeing my fellow human beings get killed by a bunch of space whales, it just sits wrong with me. It's unknown what percentage of Thrawn's 7th Fleet were actually engaged during the liberation of Lothal. The 7th Fleet was a bit larger than your average sector fleet and featured the Chimaera, along with 9 other Imperial 1-class Star Destroyers and an additional 16 Imperial 2-class Star Destroyers, and at least 6 Victory 2-class Star Destroyers. Accompanying the fleet were other ships of the line and several escort vessels. The 7th Fleet was easily as formidable as the fleet the Emperor assembled at the Battle of Endor. The only difference is that Thrawn doesn't have super-class Star Destroyers. Now, it seems very clear to me that Thrawn left the majority of his fleet, the 7th, in orbit around Lothal and only took a few of his ships to the surface of the planet. There's only so much airspace over the capital city. The rest of the fleet will just maintain a blockade around the planet and prevent rebel reinforcements from reaching the ground. In this one wide shot, we actually see that Thrawn approaches the city with just 3 ISDs. And when the whales approach, it's just utter chaos. One Imperial-class Star Destroyer loses power and begins falling to the surface. There's not enough time to evacuate the ship properly. I can only imagine the massive casualties that will be caused by this 1-mile ship crashing into a city. Now, as Thrawn is fighting this battle, he gets an urgent message from Captain Gilead Pelion from orbit. Yes, that same Pelion for all you Legends fans out there.
Several unidentified objects have just entered orbit.
My blockade will intercept them.
They've destroyed the blockade. Our ships are just gone.
Get Captain Pelion.
They came out of hyperspace. I've never seen them.
Admiral, we have incoming.
Don't worry guys, Pelion survives. We get to see him later on in The Mandalorian. He's waiting for Thrawn's return like so many other Imperials. But it is very interesting what Thrawn's comm officer says here because it mirrors exactly what the rebels say too once the Purgles escape into hyperspace.
Was that the plan? Because we're all clear up here. There are no Imperial ships left.
To me, that says one thing. Not only was Thrawn's Chimaera whisked away, so were many other Imperial-class Star Destroyers. They all simply disappeared. Which means that Thrawn might have a lot more than just one Imperial-class Star Destroyer on Peridea. And so that means he might have a much larger navy that could challenge the diminished New Republic navy. Are they finally going to give us that big naval battle we wanted and haven't seen since Rogue One? I do hope so, but the problem is, you know, Thrawn's been stuck in the wilderness for about a decade, and as we've mentioned in previous logistics videos, the Imperial-class Star Destroyer was one of the most intensive vessels in the entire fleet. And so separated from the Imperial supply lines, How does one maintain an Imperial-class Star Destroyer with all those sailors and troopers on board? How much fuel will you need? How many mouths will you have to feed? Well, actually, speaking of food, what do you got for us, Alan? Hey guys, welcome to my kitchen. You know, YouTube is hard work. I spend like 90 hours a week doing researching, writing, filming myself, building defenses, just to get all these videos out, and that leaves me very little time for other things like cooking. Smash! Which is where our sponsor for today's video comes in, Factor. Whoa, magic, it's magic. Not only does Factor do the grocery shopping for you, they also do all the nutritional planning, food prep, cooking, and cleaning. Preparing all that food is a lot of work. It takes time, energy, money, and with the way food prices keep going up, thanks to inflation, well, it's just not worth it anymore. Factor delivers these awesome, never frozen meals right to your door, and they can be heated up within just 2 minutes. Here's what they gave me for this week. Ground beef thyme cottage pie for Monday, cavatappi and shrimp scampi for Tuesday, vegetarian tamale bowl for Wednesday, herb crusted chicken for Thursday, black pepper and sage pork chops for Friday, and jalapeno lime cheddar chicken for Saturday. And they also added a pack of cold pressed juices. Awesome. Factor is flexible and easy to use. You can customize your order with up to 34 different meal choices and an additional 45 add-ons, including breakfast stuff like cinnamon apple pancakes and bacon cheddar egg bites. Oh, by the way, guys, I got the gourmet package, or as the French like to call it, gourmet, and that just means you get fancy protein, like shrimp. Head to Factor75.com and use the code GENTECH50 to get 50% off your first Factor box. All right, thanks for your patience. On to the rest of the video. So each one of these Imperial-class Star Destroyers has provisions on board for about 2 years. After that, they'll have to rely either on ship hydroponics or farming planet side on Peridia, which I guess looks like a possibility. It's not the most fertile world, but it does seem like some things can grow here. Now, it should be mentioned in Ahsoka, the only ship we actually see Thrawn in possession of is his Chimaera. We know it's the Chimaera because of the markings on the bottom of the vessel. It is unknown if the other Star Destroyers have survived the journey to Peridia. It is possible that they're just hiding somewhere, maybe in the whale graveyard. It's also possible that they were all destroyed somehow and only the Chimaera made it. Now, judging by the state of the Chimaera, I'm guessing if those other ships survived, they also survived with heavy external damage. If you take a close look at the rear thrusters on this ISD, out of the 3 KDY ion engines, the main propulsion system for the ISD, only one looks intact, and we're not even sure if that's working anymore. Instead, this ISD is mainly relying on its 4 backup Cygnus Spacework ion engines for propulsion. It's like those new mild hybrid cars, except the internal combustion engine has completely broken and now you're running on that small battery. It's not ideal, especially in combat situations. It means that this Chimaera is probably only able to travel at a quarter, even less of its actual combat speed, and this is already a very slow battleship if you compare it to Rebel ships. I'm actually shocked that this ship can even stay afloat in atmosphere, but it does tell us one thing, that the reactor is in good shape and intact, and that is very important. We know this because in the Twilight Company novel, it is stated that the Imperial-class Star Destroyer is really not built for in-atmosphere flight. It can do it, but you basically have to maintain full power in the reactor. If there's any interruption to the reactor, that means the repulsor lifts on this vessel will fail and it'll go plummeting into the surface of the planet. So not only does the reactor have to be intact, it has to be in pretty good condition and be considered reliable for this type of maneuver. And it's not the ion engines that keep this giant vessel in flight in atmosphere, it's actually the gigantic repulsor lift system. It's basically a scaled up version of what we see in these caskets here, or that little disc that Yoda used to get around with in the Jedi Temple. Now, the Imperial-class Star Destroyer's main reactor is known as a solar ionization reactor. This essentially is a fusion reactor which is capable of creating a miniature star inside of its chamber. In sci-fi, fusion reactors are a favorite because of their stability, their efficiency, and potency. It's like the opposite of nuclear fission, which we're more used to here on Earth. Nuclear fission is used in nuclear reactors. It was also used in the 2 atomic bombs that were dropped on Japan during World War II. Nuclear fission is the process in which an atom is split. Generally speaking, an extremely high-speed particle is shot at an atom. Most of the time, it's from the element uranium, and the resulting energy starts a chain reaction that creates a lot of energy. It can create a massive explosion that is far greater than any explosion created by conventional weapons. In a smaller scale reaction, it can also be used to heat up water, causing it to boil, which then creates steam, which can power turbines, and that generates electricity. So yeah, in a way, nuclear power is kind of like very steampunk. The problem is this process, just like throwing a bowling ball into a bunch of pins, is very destructive. It can be very hard to contain, and it can also create a lot of radiation and radioactive waste. Now, fusion is a much more refined process, suitable for a much civilized society. Instead of breaking atoms apart, it's about fusing atoms together. The only problem, in order to fuse these atoms together, it requires a massive amount of energy and force. It's basically like creating a small star, which is just a hyper-dense ball of materials and particles. Fusion reactors are far more stable. They don't really produce any kind of radioactive waste, and better yet, they can create net energy gain. That's kind of what Galen Erso thought he was doing when he built the Kyber crystal reactor. He believed he was creating a new, very cheap energy source that would eliminate poverty almost everywhere. And I guess it kind of worked on Jeddah a little bit. And believe it or not, here on Earth, we're actually taking small steps towards making a fusion reactor become a reality. Less than a year ago, in the National Laboratory in California, we achieved net energy in a controlled fusion reaction. Although it should be stated that this technology is nowhere near ready for commercialization. There's this running joke that human society is always 20 to 30 years away from creating fusion reactors. But like any research that pushes our understanding of physics and material science, there are many unknown unknowns that could potentially derail the entire process. But still, in this information age, we are bombarded with just how terrible and stupid humanity is, and we oftentimes forget to take a step back and look at projects like this and just be in awe and how amazing we can be as well. I think it's possible that within my lifetime, we'll have this new and extremely powerful, and most importantly, clean and cheap energy source. Maybe we'll be the last generation to have thermostat trauma. That's when your parents scream at you for turning up the AC or the heat too high, you know, energy bills being the way they are. But yeah, anyway, the Imperial-class Star Destroyer has a fusion reactor that runs on hypermatter. Containing a reaction like this, as we mentioned, is extremely difficult. In our own world, we use magnetic fields to contain that superheated plasma. But in Star Wars, these reactors are actually insulated by a metal known as dunium. It's an extremely rare material that was actually found on Lothal, and one of the main reasons why the Empire even occupied the area in the first place. It's really far in the Outer Rim. It's probably why they also sent someone as high-ranking as Grand Admiral Thrawn to handle the rebel uprising there. So any major damage done to the reactor would have been a huge headache for Thrawn. It'd be almost impossible for him to find the proper materials on Peridia to make the repairs. But if we take a look at the Star Destroyer from this lower angle, we can see the ventral bulge, that's where the reactor is placed, is completely intact. There's not even any visible damage on the surface, armor plating in this area. So that's a good sign. Hypermatter fuel is what powers these reactors, and from what I understand, it's just matter from hyperspace that is harvested by the reactor. When you bring that back to real space, this matter obviously wants to revert back to its original dimension, and that's what creates all of this energy. And so with the Chimaera's main reactor operational, this means that Thrawn does have many options left. Now, concerning the damage to the exterior of the ship, the tentacles from those purgles seem to have ripped away a lot of external armor and bulkheads. This might have exposed entire areas of the ship to the exterior. But since the ship was already in atmosphere when this happened, it probably minimizes the damage that could have been done through explosive decompression. It should be noted that Thrawn and Ezra were on the bridge of the Chimaera when its transparent steel windows were shattered, and it seems like both survived the transfer through hyperspace while exposed to the exterior somehow. That means there might actually be atmosphere in hyperspace, or perhaps that dimension just works completely different and we don't understand. But what that also means is you're probably talking about limited casualties from those hull breaches. But definitely destroyed a lot of surface weapons emplacements. The Imperial-class Star Destroyer is known for having over 60 heavy turbo laser batteries, 60 ion cannons, and an assortment of other weapons. A lot of these emplacements were probably wiped out by the tentacles. What is interesting, though, are the few bulkhead repairs that we do see are made out of gold plating, which is actually not a bad replacement for Durasteel. You know, Durasteel essentially has the same properties as regular steel, except it's more durable and dense. But gold has a much better ability to reflect heat radiation. Remember that movie Sunshine, when humans try to send a nuke to the sun to restart it? Well, how do they get close enough to the sun to send their weapon off? Well, the entire ship has a massive gold shield, and the astronauts also wear gold spacesuits. Gold also has a very high atomic density, which means it's very good against radiation. And so I guess my point is, while it might be prohibitively expensive, gold isn't the worst material to plate a ship in, especially if you can work it into an alloy that shores up its other weaknesses. And while Peridia does look like a wasteland, there could definitely be gold in the mills. What is far more important, though, than just armor and bulkhead is the fact that the shield generator dome on top of the ISD seems to be intact. Well, actually, the one on the right seems to have suffered some surface damage, but the dome itself is intact. This really is the first and best line of defense for any kind of Star Destroyer. Shields, you can basically recharge. Bulkhead and armor plating, you cannot. So it's a good sign to see that the tentacles didn't wipe out these very important pieces of machinery. Now, we don't see much of the interior of the Star Destroyer except for the main hangar, which I'm sure some of you have pointed out is surprisingly small for a ship that is almost a mile in length. And that's more of a problem with Imperial naval design and naval doctrine. This big old ship is essentially a battleship, able to only engage line-of-sight targets. The 4 squadrons of TIE fighters on board lack hyperdrives and really are only good for screening enemy forces. It's a really large ship, but it's a really technologically and tactically limited ship. It can really just only engage ships that are close to it. Now, if Thrawn had a Venator-class Star Destroyer with its massive hangar that runs almost the entire length of the ship and could deploy hundreds of fighters, many equipped with hyperdrives, well, that would have been a game changer, especially with Thrawn's strategic and tactical mind. I mean, the difference here between an ISD and a Venator is like the difference between an old-fashioned battleship versus a modern aircraft carrier. I think Thrawn could have easily taken on the majority of the New Republic fleet with just one single Venator. But unfortunately, he just has an Imperial-class Star Destroyer. And what we do see in the hangar are undamaged TIE fighters, and it looks like a bunch of gunships behind them to deploy stormtroopers to the ground. Some of these TIE fighters were certainly lost fighting the Purrgil, but at a minimum, these ships are still useful for fending off enemy snub fighter attacks. They can also be used as escorts for those gunships if you're trying to assault the surface of a planet. So how many night troopers does Thrawn have left on board? Well, it's kind of hard to say, and that's because these aren't really normal stormtroopers. As we mentioned in our last video, there's something off about them. For all we know, they could even be undead. The red magical Night Sister ribbon, the cracks in the helmets are not a good sign. But generally, ships like the Chimaera have around a legion, or just around 10,000 stormtroopers on them. That combined with the 20 to 40,000 caskets that are being brought on board, which are most likely filled with Night Sister zombies, gives Thrawn a pretty big military force, but probably not enough to take on the whole New Republic by himself. I mean, when we see the Home 1 in this shot here, it's surrounded by Republic cruisers, a Nebulon B frigate. This fleet alone is enough to take on the Chimaera, no matter how skilled Thrawn is. Also, remember, the New Republic still has Admiral Akbar. The Mon Cala tactician might not be as brilliant as Thrawn, but when you outnumber your enemy by so much, does it really matter? And so I think Thrawn has a really underpowered Imperial-class Star Destroyer with just, a portion of its full combat abilities intact. And so I think I'll have to depend more on his ability to rally the various Imperial warlords that are still operating in the Outer Rim territories. Clearly, Captain Pellaeon has been holding down the fort, and he's been trying to hoard resources and keep them intact for as long as possible.
Commander, your hit-and-run operations are gaining too much notice. If we are perceived as anything other than a group of unorganized remnant warlords, the New Republic will increase their efforts to hunt us down.
The Empire might be scattered all across the Unknown Region and the Outer Rim, but, together, if they were united, they still have a very formidable fleet that could take on the New Republic any day. And Captain Pellaeon understands this. He knows that they can't risk or gamble any large operation until Thrawn makes it back.
That strength must not be wasted. Grand Admiral Thrawn's return will herald in the re-emergence of our military and provide Commandant Hux enough time to deliver on Project Necromancer.
Sure, he kind of seems uncertain here, but his assessment is definitely correct. From our calculations, Thrawn by himself does not have enough resources to create a legitimate threat against the New Republic. Even if several Imperial-class Star Destroyers make it to the world of Peridea, there is one slight problem. I believe the Eye of Sion, which looks like a giant hyperspace ring, can only be used on one Star Destroyer. I could be wrong, maybe it's a lot larger than we realize and it can be scaled up to fit multiple Star Destroyers, but I'm probably going to lean in with my first instincts here and say it's not. And so it looks like Thrawn will only be able to bring enough troops with him to survive a small skirmish against the New Republic. He'll definitely need reinforcements, and these Imperial warlords will need to get to him before the New Republic does. Well, that is my assessment of Thrawn's naval capabilities. Let me know in the comment section below what you guys think. Also, don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification button down below so you don't miss out on the rest of our awesome content. As usual, my name is Alan, and my allegiance is to the Republic, to democracy.